ago, I posted a video where I talked about all the books that I think are actually worth BookTok's hype, but today's video is going to be the complete opposite of that one. I will be talking about the books that I personally think are not worth the hype that they get on BookTok or on BookTube. Now, these are just my personal opinions, so if your favorite book happens to make the cut, no hard feelings. You can still love a book even though I absolutely hate it, and it's perfectly fine. So let's start with a series first, and that would be the Folk of the Air series. All three books in this series I didn't really enjoy. The first book is The Cruel Prince, the second book is The Wicked King, I think, and then The Queen of Nothing. This is a fantasy series. It is YA, so maybe that's why I didn't really like it. I didn't know it was YA going into it, and I read this right after I read the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, which I absolutely love that entire series, so maybe that's why I just couldn't really connect to these books, because I had just finished reading a amazing fantasy series that wasn't YA, that had a lot of action, a lot of romance, and these were just a complete letdown for me. I thought that the main character, Jude, was too self-absorbed. She was obsessed with power. I didn't like the male main character. I think his name was Hayden, if I remember correctly. Carden, not Caden, Carden. I didn't really like how he treated Jude in the first book or in the second book, to be honest. He was a straight up bully to her, and I know that he has a past and there's reasons for him being the way that he was towards her, but I just couldn't see past that. So I didn't really enjoy this series. I know that a lot of people love it. I'm just not one of them. The next two books that I don't think are worth of all the hype that they get are The Guest List and The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. No offense to the author, I just found her books to be incredibly boring and incredibly predicting. Both of these books are thrillers. They're both murder mysteries, so you don't really know who the victim is or who the killer is until the very end of the book. Honestly, the plot and the premise itself sounds very interesting, but the execution of both books just felt so flat for me. They're basically the same exact book, but with different characters and a different setting. I read The Guest List first, didn't really enjoy it. The murder mystery was very predictable. The twists were predictable. I was able to guess who the murderer was, who the victim was. Then I decided to give her a second chance, so I picked The Hunting Party, and it turned out to be exactly the same as The Guest List. So I concluded that Lucy Foley's writing is just not for me. I don't really like her thrillers. I mean, if there's a book by Lucy Foley that you actually enjoy and that you think that it's not super predictable, let me know in the comments below and I'll check it out. But since I read two of her books and pretty much hated both books, I don't think I'll be checking out any of her other books anytime soon, unless you guys think that I truly should. Whenever I read a thriller, I want to be pleasantly surprised. I don't want to be able to predict what the ending is going to be or what the big twist at the end is going to be. So for that reason, those two books were a huge letdown. Another thriller that I found to be a complete letdown for me was The Maid by Nita Prose. Prior to reading this book, I heard so many great things about it. It won a Goodreads Choice Award for Best Thriller in 2022, so I thought this book has to be amazing. Like, it won an award, it has to be freaking great and amazing to read. I read it and I was incredibly bored. It is a very short book, but I felt like the book just dragged on and on and on. It follows a main character who happens to be a hotel maid. This character struggles to really understand social cues. Like, she doesn't really understand when people are laughing at her, not with her. Sometimes she says things that offend people and she doesn't really understand why it offends them. But the one thing that she does know is that she absolutely loves her job as a hotel maid and she loves to clean. One day she goes into a hotel room and finds a guest dead, and the guest was murdered. The police automatically assume that she's a suspect because of her odd behavior according to them. I thought it was going to focus more on the murder mystery element of the plot, but I felt like every other page was just describing how much the main character loved her job as a maid and how she loved to clean. So it was really boring to me. The ending was super predictable. There was a twist at the end that I didn't see coming, but I felt like it was just thrown in there as an afterthought and it didn't really fit in with the rest of the story. And I don't understand why this is really labeled as a a thriller. I think if it was labeled as a slow mystery, then maybe I would have lowered my expectations a bit. But since it's labeled as a thriller, I expected it to be a little bit more fast-paced, again, more focused on the murder mystery element of the plot. So I didn't really enjoy this one, and I really don't understand the hype with The Maid. This next book is a recent read for me, and I'm really disappointed that I didn't enjoy it, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Let me start off by saying that I really loved the diversity in this book. I love that it has LGBTQ plus representation. One of the main characters, if I remember correctly, is Hispanic, so I love that. This is a romantic comedy. It follows the son of the President of the United States and then a prince. It is enemies to lovers, so I thought I was going to love it for that reason. And again, I've heard so many great things about it, but when I read it, it was definitely a letdown. I just didn't really enjoy the politics in this book. When I read a romance book, I don't want to read about politics. Like, that's the last thing I want to read about when I pick up a romance book. Even though I liked the two main characters and I really enjoyed their love story, I just struggled to get through the book, again, because of all the politics that were talked about. I also feel like it was too idealistic. That just didn't really sit well with me, so I didn't really like it for that reason. And a lot of you guys have commented that you felt the same way, so I kind of feel validated in my opinion. I just didn't really like that one, and I really wanted to love it. I was so excited to finally read it, and when I finally read it, it was just a letdown, unfortunately. Another recent read that was a complete letdown for me was Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. Now, this is childhood friends to lovers, second chance romance, and I've said it a million times on my channel before, but I'm not really a huge fan of friends to lovers. That trope just doesn't really do it for me. But I was actually enjoying this book until the very end. There was a certain trope that was introduced at the very end of this book. It just ruined the entire love story for me. I just can't see past that trope, and I absolutely despise the trope that was introduced at the end. I don't want to say what the trope was because it might ruin the book for you in case you haven't read it, and I think that obviously everyone should read a book and make their own opinions on that book. And I was really sad because, again, as I was reading it, I actually really loved the book. I loved the characters, and immediately when I read the last couple chapters, I was like, really? You're going to introduce that trope and then just make everything seem like it worked out perfectly? I don't know. I just can't see past that trope, so I didn't really like this book. But I can see why a lot of people do love this book because the characters are very likable. It has a small town vibe to it. It's not super long, so it's a pretty quick read. It does remind me a lot of Love in Other Words, which I will get into Love in Other Words in a second, but I actually like this one more than I liked Love in Other Words. Again, just until the very end when that trope was introduced and I was like, okay, well, I hate this book now. Speaking of Love in Other Words, hi Christina Lauren. This is another childhood friends to lovers book, second chance romance. It is very similar to Every Summer After. I actually think that Love in Other Words came out before Every Summer After, so this one is very similar to Love in Other Words. It is literally Love in Other Words 2.0, but I just didn't really like the characters in this book, and I love Christina Lauren's writing. I love their book, The Unhoneymooners and The Soulmate Equation, so I was really excited to read this one, but it just did not do it for me. I found that the main character, I think her name was Macy, if I remember correctly, was extremely boring, and something happened at the end that I just didn't really agree with. So once again, I couldn't see past that trope, and I've talked about this book a lot on my channel, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Definitely a book that I don't think is worth the hype at all. And then we have one last friends to lovers book that I just cannot understand the hype. Well, actually, I can understand the hype behind this book a little bit because the characters are actually very lovable, and that is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. The two main characters are best friends. They go on vacation every single year, but during one of their vacations, something happens that makes them drift apart, so they stop talking to one another for, I think, 2 years. One of the main characters, Poppy, wants to rekindle their friendship and move past what happened between them, so she calls the other main character up, Alex, to go on basically one final vacation with her to try to save their friendship because she misses him. It's also alternating timelines, so you see them go on all these different vacations, and then you also see them in the present time with their awkwardness and trying to learn how to be friends again. Love the characters. I absolutely adored Poppy. She was super outgoing. She was so bubbly. Loved Alex. He was the complete opposite of Poppy, but complimented her so well. And then I got to the very end once again, and the big reveal of why they weren't talking just felt so lame to me. I couldn't understand why, if they were best friends for so long, why they let this little incident drive them apart. I do love Emily Henry's Book Lovers and Beach Read. A lot of you guys said that when someone enjoys beach read, they don't really enjoy people we meet on vacation. So I think I just fell into that category, and this one was just a no for me. The next book that I think is a little overrated is Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma. This is a romantic comedy, fake dating, enemies to lovers. Those are some of my favorite tropes. So I thought that I for sure was going to love this book, and I ended up not liking it at all. I think I gave it a 1-star rating or maybe a 2-star rating. I don't remember, but I do remember that I absolutely hated this book. I couldn't really connect with either of the two main characters. I didn't really buy their chemistry or their love story. Again, I think it just comes down to personal preference. Do really like that the characters in this book are super diverse. Another book that I didn't really enjoy was Bully by Penelope Douglas. This is actually my first Penelope Douglas book. This one is pretty much childhood friends to enemies to lovers. The two main characters, Tate and what was the guy's name in this book? I already forgot. Jared? In their childhood, they were best friends, and then something happened that Jared became a huge bully to Tate. It got so bad that Tate actually had to leave her high school for a year to try to escape him. Honestly, I couldn't see past the whole bullying thing because it wasn't just like playful teasing. Like, no, Jared straight up bullied this girl. Once I found out why he was being such an asshole to Tate, like my heart kind of softened, and I was like, oh, I feel bad for him. But at the same time, I'm like, listen, you straight up bullied this girl. You made her cry literally every single day. It got so bad that the girl had to leave for an entire year to get away from you, and now you're going to tell me that you have loved her this entire time? If you loved her, why would you cause her so much pain? So didn't really buy their love story. Didn't really see any chemistry between the two main characters. I felt like this relationship was a walking red flag, and I've heard a lot of good things about Penelope Douglas. I do want to pick up another book from her. I don't know what book to pick up from Penelope Douglas next. If you do have a recommendation, let me know in the comments below. Okay, you guys, so these are all the books that I think are severely overhyped on BookTok. I'm sorry if this video hurt your feelings. They are definitely not my favorites. I need to figure out a way to get rid of them. I think I'm going to donate them or try to sell them online. I don't know. I want them out of my sight. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with me. Let me know one book that was recommended to you by BookTok that you absolutely hated. I would love to know. And again, that is pretty much it for today's video. Really hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I would love to have you a part of my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.